Hey everyone, welcome to day 2 of Metatopia for you early risers out on the your time zones. Thank you very much for joining us. This panel is Do You Want to Build a Snowman? Printing and Publishing Where You Are. Well, we wanted to get a little bit more of a wider experience. Unfortunately, Elizabeth couldn't make it, so unfortunately we're only going to be talking about Canada, the US, and Mexico. Just because that's who we have represented here. Because we all know publishing and printing are different where you are. So my name is Jonathan Lavallee. I'm going to be moderating. I've been making games for over 20 years now, which always is frightening to say when I say it. And I'm going to let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves. So Alastor, do you want to go first and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Alastor. I'm a game designer. I'm from Mexico. And yeah, I have been working on this for around 3 years now. And I am part of a club called Action Stories.
All right, Mo, go ahead.
Good morning. I'm Mo, coming in from the West Coast. Fortunately, this is the time I normally work. So I'm up. I'm a designer who is doing lots of silly stuff like cards and books and trying to get into board games. So I've dabbled in this space, a little more than dabbled.
Awesome. All right, so let's just jump right in then, and I'm going to ask a question: is what does when you have a game? So we all know you're here. You have a game. You've even got it, written. We're not even going to talk about like that kind of part of it. We're going to go straight into the printing part of it. So, how do you find artists for your stuff? Right? Because, for example, I know in Canada here, I have access to like the internet is a wonderful tool. We have access to there. I've done things with stock photography sites and the like. I'm wondering if this is a similar experience across the board. Alastor, how about you? What do you do when you need to look for artists?
Yeah, normally we just use the internet, or we have the advantage that many of the big art schools here have like these open fairs where the students can showcase their work. So we actually try to work with a lot of new artists, mainly because 2 of our in-house artists are from those schools, so they know the teachers know everyone. But yeah, we mainly work through the internet, and we try to focus mostly on Latin American artists, but that's just like a personal thing.
Mm-hmm. No, hire local, man. Not gonna lie.
Yeah. One, because it's like cheaper, and 2, because the language barrier can get complicated with art, especially with art briefs and art direction.
Yeah. Yep.
So Mo, how about you?
I started off at Metatopia, so I met some artists who actually show up to Metatopia, and they did some amazing work for me. I also went on Fiverr. I went on DeviantArt, and I ran into a lot of people who are amazing artists who don't necessarily have the bandwidth to do art, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason, I had a hard time finding folks who would deliver. Because when you're doing a game, you don't need a picture. You need 20 or 30 pictures. If you're doing a 200-page book, you need closer to 50 pictures maybe. So I ended up finding a couple of people who were very good within my price range and would deliver. And, I stumbled into that space, but that was a journey in and of itself.
Right, exactly. So it's good to know that when we talk about looking for art, we're all kind of looking where we can to find artists, and the internet's a wonderful tool for there. But let's talk about publishing now. So moving on straight to book publishing. So I know for me in Canada, it's actually better for me generally to print in the United States if I'm printing low print runs, mainly because shipping across the border from Canada to the US is prohibitively expensive. And so it adds, even if I lose money in the exchange rate, because right now the Canadian dollar is back when I started game design, when it was 60 cents on the US dollar, which was always fun traveling to the States and going into conventions. People say it's only $5, and I'd be like, but for you, it's only $5, right? But even then, it still seems to be a little bit better because the shipping just absolutely destroys me. And again, most of my warehousing is in the States. If I have any warehousing through any companies that I'm working with, it's all in the States. So I'm always shipping. And if we're shipping back and forth all the time, that just kills my my budget.
Margin.
Yeah. And so, Alistair, how about you? When you're talking about printing your books, where are you printing your books? How are you printing your books?
We normally for books we have discovered like 3 different options.
Yeah.
The first one is in China because even with before the shipping crisis, it was like honestly like the best option cost wise because many of them offer delivery at point. So basically, we can just print in China and they just deliver it right in the United States in the warehouse. The second option, and one that is we have actually to check it recently, it's in Liechtenstein in Europe. Same thing, they have like the delivery at point thing, so that you just pay. The budget was for a 200-page full color book, Dungeons and Dragons size. It was around 10 USD per book with delivery at point. The issue with these two is that the print run minimum is around 100 and 500, 1,500. So you have to actually justify printing that amount of books. Anything lower than that, and we also need to print in the United States. As you mentioned, the shipping thing between we want to print locally and then send to the United States is just extremely expensive. And yeah, it's just unfeasible with the amount of books. It's just easier if you have like a low print around 500, 700, just print in the US and ship it there. Because most of the market is also in the US, so it doesn't make that much sense to print elsewhere.
So Mo, what about you? We all talked about printing in the States. So as someone in the States, what does that look like for you when you're printing books or when you're creating that kind of thing?
So I'm curious to this part, I my game was finished in 2020. So I had already heard all the horror stories about printing in China being very slow. There was also the shipping margin. And so I ended up going through drive-through RPG and just doing a small print on demand batch, So I printed 500 books, and books look good, That might be a feature of this being my first game. And I could imagine, I definitely would have loved a hardcover book that, had a lot of more bells and whistles, but we'll get to the distribution part later. I've been able to sell way more PDFs during COVID and physical copies, and it just is what it is. So, interested in hearing more about Liechtenstein. Maybe you could put a link in, Alastor.
Yeah, I'm looking for the link, so just give me a second.
Yeah, and to say too, that was going to be another thing I was going to say is that there are sites now for distribution. We're getting that a little bit, but drive-through RPG, doing a print on demand. That's my plan for the next book, mainly because the other issue that comes into play is warehousing. Right? Once you print 1,000 or even 500 books, right? It takes up physical space.
Right.
Right. And I still have a closet full of things that I'm like, I can't wait to get rid of, having already gotten rid of a bunch of things. Right. So, there comes a point in time where you're like, how do I store all these things? How do I, put that in? And, despite the fact that, Canada has a large amount of space, we don't have too many dedicated warehouses for games. There's like 2 or 3, and they're not inexpensive. Right. So at that point in time, you're looking at your own self-storage, but then you're looking at your own inventory control. How do I know how many I have left? How many have I shipped out? Which I am terrible at. So I could not tell you what my current inventory stock is on anything.
And again, let's get back to when we get to distribution models. There are no conventions. So there's a certain point where you could plan on selling, a dozen or so books, if you travel to cons in the United States at least, and you would know that you'd be moving inventory. So when cons start, it's worth getting a couple boxes of books. Until then,
Yeah. No, I see that. Alistair, how about you? When we talk about like print on demand, have you thought of doing any kind of print on demand stuff, or is it all you just?
I just sent the contact for the one in Europe. It's basically the company that Modifius use on Cubicle 7.
Okay.
That's actually how we found them.
Hey, see, that's another thing too. I guess the thing too is if you're looking for different types of options, a good thing is talk to other people, right? The industry isn't particularly large, and most people there's not like no, only my printer. You can never use them, right? If people have done well by us, I know a lot of people here like to promote those same kind of printers and publishers, right? So
it's more about keeping that printer open till I get my next job to get into that printer. Can you give
Yeah,
this a
exactly.
business?
We don't want them to lose business in the meantime, like it has
Right,
happened
right,
before.
right.
yeah, right.
As for
Project.
the print on demand question, we actually did print on demand for the maze,
Hmm.
and at the time it seems like a good option. The issue with print on demand is that now that conventions are open again, print on demand is just very expensive depending on the size of the book, and it
Mm,
makes having the product at conventions just not feasible. Like we suffered like like 1 month ago in GameCon with the IGDM booth with the maze. It was just like the book is very nice, we have it print on demand, but it's just very expensive for us to have it in the physical inventory and to
right.
ship it to stores that want it and for conventions. So I think print on demand works if you have like a small product like signs or like anything under 100 pages. I think like a print on demand is probably a very good option. But if you go over that size, it's better just like to save more and do a physical print run.
Hmm. Yeah, see, like I'm looking at that more to save inventory space, right? Like I'm looking at it to be like, okay, I can do this. But like you said, 100%, the margin is changes drastically from when you do that versus an offset print run. All right, so but let's move on to that. Let's talk about you know, not just the publishing of the book and the printing of the book, and we get it together. Let's talk about accessories, right? I don't know if you've looked into getting, say, specialty dice done, or there we go. We've got specialty dice there, specialty dice, or cards, or other elements to your game. Um, you know, where are you going for that? What does that look like for you? Because right now, for me, the only option I have is drive-through cards because a lot of the card shops, again, if you're going to say China, you're looking at a large print run, and I'm
Mhm.
not in the space of having a lot of inventory for that, or a lot of print run for that, or a lot of space. Um, but same thing with dice. Dice has its own weird kind of thing. So Mo, actually starting with you because you have your custom dice there. What does that process look like for you? How have you gone through that? What does that look like?
I went to one of my local conventions and met the people from Dice Envy, and they are a local dice manufacturer. And apparently, what that means is they manufacture dice in China and they sell them locally. So um, they hand held me through the process. I was able to my get a print run started. That is, I got these are my proofs, and yeah, I mean, I was looking for kind of Chinese, Japanese dice that foreigners could read. So, like, they actually have dots on them, so you could count the dots or you could read the symbol, and kind of for
Hmm.
game immersion and all that stuff. And game immersion took a turn when COVID hit. So I have not put in my final order for 2,000 dice yet. Because again, it's that whole distribution part. But they were very helpful and hand holding me through the process. Um, and when you're publishing in China, I think the real question is always kind of what is the interface? You know, um, how much English are you getting? Are you getting responsive time? Are you how confident are you that you're actually going to get the product? So anybody can go on Alibaba.com and see thousands of people offering to do these services. And for my first time out, I found Dice Envy was very supportive in getting that done. So um, yeah, you know, I strongly recommend them.
Right. So when we talk about that too, like when we're looking at custom dice, like what do you need to provide too, like beyond just kind of thing?
The details, excellent. So I sent them a PDF that had embedded all of the sides of the dice, and they kind of cleaned it up. They sent it back to me. They said, "Is this what you're looking for?" Because I'm a game designer. I am not a graphic designer by a sight. I can barely draw my name. Uh, so they cleaned it up and they kind of shepherded me through the process. I think it was less than $200 to get uh, maybe 2 dozen dice made,
Hmm.
and they said these would be the master dice. And after I got to
Your
roll
mold,
those
yeah.
dice and look at those dice, then I could put in an order for a larger amount. So that was, I had just done a successful Kickstarter, and like I had some change jangling around. I thought, this was, I shouldn't have done this. It was before I finished buying all my art and maps. But I did the thing, and yeah, the dice came back. They're beautiful. They were able to get me dice, both black dice with white dots and white dice with black dots, or I think it was like cream dice with black dots,
Hmm.
just so I could see. And, like it was a very good experience. I can't wait till, like in California, cons haven't opened up yet. So I'm looking forward to cons opening back up because I know people are going to see these dice and the dice will sell themselves. You know,
Hey, Alistair, so how about you? Have you done any type of like additional?
Don't like the budgeting for it because at some point we wanted like well, we still want to change some of our more smaller books into more like board gamey style,
Mhm.
similar to how Paranoia was sold. And yeah, the answer for it was like yeah, the Chinese can do anything. Mainly we did the budgeting with Wingo and with Panda.
Mhm.
Out of these two, Panda is way easier to get to get an accurate budget, and their webpage is extremely friendly. Issue with Panda, it's one is a little more on the expensive side, and two, their minimum order is 2,000. Well, yeah, you can they have in their website you can provide. I want this kind of dice, this kind of books, and you can provide like everything you need, and they will give it to you.
Mhm.
When we're budgeting for a small Jawas box with 4 small books plus dice plus cards, I think it was around 14 USD per copy. Yeah, 12 to 14 USD per copy.
Yeah, and
Which
you're doing
was
hardback, right?
no, for that it was like similar to Paranoia, so it was just like self stitch and soft cover, but
Mhm.
it was like inside the box, and you have like a more board game experience with the RPG.
Right, you're talking about a box. As soon as you say box, it throws like $3 to $4 onto the price of everything.
Yeah, you have the advantage of it not being hardcover, so that makes it a little way cheaper for each individual
Yeah.
book. But now we also have like dice, small cards, and we want to have like erasable, similar to zombie boards. Was like the idea.
Mhm. Yeah, no, totally. It's interesting because when you fall into that board game thing, I know talking to board game publishers right now. I know this is mostly RPG, but board game publishers too have been. I know a lot of them have been looking at printing elsewhere, and even with all the uncertainty, it's still not even feasible to print elsewhere. Just because as soon as you start adding components to things, the price just shoots up astronomically, and they can't. It just doesn't match. And so when you look at anything that's like a board game that has board game components like a box and cards and all these other things, yeah, at 14, yeah, you're looking at probably charging about 50 USD for that. And that's for a box board game experience with those kind of things. That's not out of the realm of reality, right? Like that's kind of what it is. So yeah, no, that's super interesting because I know I've done a couple card games through Drive Through Cards for me, and again, just the inventory. I just don't want to have inventory, and that's what's causing that for me. But it's interesting because we go from peripherals because the other thing too we didn't talk about is apps, right? And I know that
Well,
companies have been.
I got one more thing to say about cards. So
Oh, go
I've
ahead.
been going through drive through cards too, and so they do what they do. They just discontinued bridge size cards,
Mhm.
and for no good reason, I designed all my games in bridge size. So like I'm able to sell card games, through my local network, and like literally I'm facing the need to have to go back and redesign the cards. And I think in normal times I would have um, just found a different, printer.
Yeah.
Um, so, but they're able to do the work, but I think they're having problems getting the paper size. So I did just do a print run out of China for a game that called Switchosaurus, which, a buddy of mine, he's like, "Hey, you do games, help me." So he has tarot size cards in a metal box, and it's beautiful and everything. Um, so this is currently in process. He ordered his game in late July. It was printed in August, and it's been on a boat since early September, and it's supposed to arrive in November 16th. So, kind of the conversation is that's really fast, and that presumes that like all of this backup stuff hasn't happened, and so we're more than expecting November 16th to get. It's going to be another 3 to 6 weeks. He was really hoping to have product by Christmas. And kind of one of the things that we talked about, and now he's regretting we didn't do, was fast ship some units on a plane. So you have an opportunity to kind of split your shipment between the boat and like getting it in a couple weeks because they'll just put it on a plane.
Mhm.
And he got, I think, four sample units, and now he's wishing he had 20 because he could sell 20 for Christmas,
Right.
no problem.
Right.
um so from what I'm understanding, the getting things printed in China right now isn't the problem, and like that's in this moment. Like
Mhm.
apparently this is a constantly moving target. It really does boil down to maybe getting it off the boat.
Well, I mean,
um
the other thing too with that is paper, right? I'm sure there's another panel around there too about the cost of paper going up and all
right.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
So,
and his costs were absolutely about 3 times what they were when we priced this out 2 years ago. Um, he's paying 3 times what he would have paid on Ninja Print, um, and they're pretty inflated for kind of getting printed in China. So, but he bit the bullet. He took some cards out. He wanted the metal box, and so, we're waiting to see, and we're also waiting to see if, the rest of the product is the same as the samples, same quality.
mhm.
So that's why I'm not putting the company's name out there because, I'm kind of, you know,
Waiting to
just
see
figure out
still,
how
yeah.
this goes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, Alastor, so
Also,
you had it. I didn't know if you had your hand up to say something or if you were.
Yeah, just one regarding the issues with the print on demand is, as you mentioned, if they somehow discontinue the service, then you're out of luck and you have like to ask for everything again. That actually happened to a lot of creators that had like the signs in Drive to RPG when they discontinued the Saddle Stitch
Yeah.
because now they have to print on the soft cover. And yeah, that's one of the main issues that I have with print on demand. Is you're at the mercy of any changes in that they want to have in their supply chain. In the case Lightning Forge, we are very
Mhm.
dependent on drive-through. And the second, just to confirm, like, yeah, the issue right now is not printing in China, even with the paper shortage. is the shipping. Like we have a board game that the original cost to ship was 700 USD. It ended up being 2,200. Fortunately, if you're seeing this
Spin the
right now,
wheel.
yeah, you're seeing this right now. By the time you manage to print your book, it should probably be already over. Like the most guesstimates about when it should end, it was like around Chinese New Year, so February, March. But yeah, I would recommend not trying to print anything in this time
No.
period, or at least not to ship it. And it also touches on the second, as well mentioned, we're trying to avoid inventories. One thing we're actually having to do is to have to talk with Emirati to see of any of the fulfillment centers, and actually they have like an inventory option. Most of them are not that expensive. Like with Emirati, they having them like reserve, I think was a small warehouse space, was around 25 USD per month. So it really depends on how many games you have and how big is your current inventory. Because especially if you do not live in the US, you will have to rely on other people for this kind of stuff. So I will always go to just going with people or with companies that already have like a track record. Especially if you're not able like to be there to supervise stuff.
Right? That's a really big thing I think to think about too, is that yeah, you have to, if you're, you don't have the space yourself, you have to build a supply chain. You have to build your own trusted vendors, you have to build your own relationships with all those people. Yeah, I think it's really, thank you, Alistair. I think it's a really good point too, right? The further you are away, the more you have to rely on these other people.
And not only do you have to rely on them, it's also a marginal cost, that you gotta, you know, include to what you're not earning after you're printing, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep. Nope, 100%. Mostly, you had a point in relation. I wanted to Alistair to get in just because he had other thing you
Yeah.
wanted to say, and just finish that off, and then I think we can go into what that kind of distribution model looks like.
Well, that's exactly what I was getting into. So I have been distributing my RPG through Indie Press Revolution,
Hmm.
and they do a great job of taking my game out and getting it in front of friendly local game stores.
Hmm.
And they took some games to Gen Con, which I didn't go to, and I sold some books, and that was fantastic. Um, my buddy is actually going through Amazon fulfillment. So again, this is an interesting experiment for me to watch and figure out if I'm gonna get you know on board with. Uh, his game is very much a kids game. It's an educational product, so I don't think it is standard fare for what we do in the RPG space.
Hmm.
Um, and he's looking at a totally different market than we typically look at for the RPG space. But he's going to have 100 games at his house. And he is absolutely looking at sending those to podcasters, bloggers, mommy groups, and homeschool hubs to kind of market. And the other 900 are going to Amazon, and you know he will work on doing his hustle that way. He has some skills I don't have and kind of marketing, and so yeah, I'm really curious to see how that works out because I have a couple kids games that kind of role players aren't going to buy unless they have a 5-year-old. So it's like, how exactly does this work?
Well, I mean, let's talk about the distribution model, because I know I believe all of us have experience with IPR, which I love. I do think IPR does a really good
Mhm.
job of trying to meet the needs of the people who they're working with, and help work their own businesses stuff out, right? If things aren't selling, they do send them back to you, right? Like because they have so much warehouse space themselves, or there's stuff there. But like also we talked about the problem with um, if you have one person, you're kind of beholden to them, right? So how do you diversify that? What else are you doing distribution wise, try to help yourself? Alistair?
case, we're very dependent on the IGDN marketing team and all the stuff for all the distribution. We want to branch out a little with IPR. The issue with IPR is that we, as we mentioned, like currently our only physical game is the Maze, and that's on print on demand. So it's not really very feasible for us to have it through normal distribution. For the next ones, we are actually going to save up and do it like normal physical print runs, and we are going to work with IPR for most of the stuff. As you mentioned, they have already contact with stores. They can get your product to GameCon, to other conventions, and like the business model is like very good for the creators in this case.
Well, and the thing too with I'll just pop up the IGDN here a little bit too. I think it's useful because they do have links to ACD. And again, wildly different use for everyone. Again, it's one of those things that if you are not a super popular one, you're not getting in a lot of things sold through there, but it is a different avenue and it will get it into stores. Because I know, Mo, how about you?
So I have content. I have product at IPR. I actually have been driving up and down California, going to my friendly local game stores. Last summer, I was able to interface with a lot of game stores, and I was able to run a couple of games on Facebook because they were managing their communities on Facebook. And so I was able to run games on Facebook and sell games through the store, so the store got their cut, and essentially I got their marketing, if that makes sense. And showing up and shaking hands or elbow bumping these days, leaving a flyer seemed to I moved a good 50 copies that way, and that's that's no small feat. This is gas. This is time. I tell my family I'm going driving today. I also have the benefit of having a kid who for me, I don't know if it's a part of the equation, but like he sees me go in, he sees me talking to store owners, and he sees them giving me cash for my books. And it's like there's a level of like, this is a hustle. It's legal, but it's a hustle. And if you get out there and you pound the pavement, and sometimes you got to visit folks 2 or 3 times, but they pick it up, and you tweet about them, and you keep it moving.
Yeah, there's enough. There's like, again, one of those things is act local too, right? Like,
Right,
if you
right.
have the space and the capacity to do that, if you have stores around you, by all means, it never hurts to kind of hit them up to also be that kind of distribution point. Because I know that even in board games too, the larger distribution companies, that model is just kind of in shambles currently. A lot of them aren't even looking at RPGs, and again, they won't look at you individually because you are not big enough for them to care about, which is why something like the IGDN is useful to get in with ACD, because they can go, give us blah 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 blah, and that's all one order for them. It's not 20 different smaller orders for them. But I also know that because there's just so many games coming out, a lot of them aren't even stocking things with known game companies. Like, they're looking at pre-orders only. So if you haven't been a big and like pre-order RPGs from stores, like, what is that? are you right? That's not a thing that large distribution companies are even looking at. So it's changed greatly from when I first started. But even then, when I first started, I was told flat out that if I left, was at the time a consolidator, they would drop me like a hot rock because they just didn't have time for me. So it's interesting to see what's going on and how that kind of distribution works. Now, I know IPR is, like I said, a big player in the field. We have different ways to get at it, but it's not as straightforward. Which leads me kind of to the next topic, which is, how do you market? Right? What does marketing look like where you are? Alastor, I'm terrible at marketing, so I'm not going to have anything to give here on this one. But Alastor, I'm going to go to you. And
I'm also kind of terrible at self marketing. So yeah, that's why my social media presence is awful. The one thing that we notice is marketing mostly works when in the Kickstarter phase. We eventually managed to get Facebook ads running.
Hmm.
We had like a very nice return on ad investment on Facebook ads for our last Kickstarter for masks. It was a 5e RPG book, so that also helps.
Hmm.
Well, yeah, mostly it's just like learning how to do Facebook ads. Google ads, we tried them and we hadn't had like the same success with them. For the ones that we know that have had success with Google ads, it's mostly with videos and on YouTube. So like the
Hmm.
small 30-second, 5-second YouTube ad
Mm.
videos, those work for board games and RPGs. But like normal Google ads, we haven't seen like any success with those. It's mostly just Facebook ads and talk to your reviewers. Recently, we have found like a very good return on investment with TikTok. Like some TikTok
Mm.
creators are very open to getting like the books or the PDFs and talking about them. We have seen some really nice conversion when we did for the maze promotions for the Ennis. We actually saw some very nice conversion on TikTok.
No, that's really good. Mo, how about you? What does that look like for you? I know we already talked about boots on the ground because we talked a little bit about we can go into more in conventions, but also like hitting
Listen,
stores, hitting local scenes.
I so this is where kind of my hustle has really fallen apart. I like talking to people. I will turn on the camera. I will talk to folks. I will happily show up and meet people and press the flesh. All these things that for the last 18 months, I haven't been kosher in Los Angeles. So um, my marketing game has been weak. I've had a hard time getting a proper AP done for my game, and I see how that does the business. Um, I essentially pretty much got a design partner, and my design partner is able to kind of eat the street and hang out on Discord and talk to people in a way that I I guess I'm old because like when I grew up, you don't just drop into somebody's conversational thread, and that's what online is about right now. So just jumping in and saying, hey, say what you said again, and I hate that. um,
Oh, we're
so
we're we're old's internet. That's how that works, right? Like,
right,
internet olds.
internet old. So um but my design partner Michael Lowe has made tons of traction, um just on Discord, meeting people, developing a fan base. And I hate to say it, but the best marketing I've had for Shibuya Nights has been moving on to the next game. And next game, I'm I designed Shibuya Nights kind of in my little corner of the world and then released it, and that's the wrong thing to do. If that
Hmm.
makes sense. I would have been way better off, doing a quick start guide, doing a freemium model, um, letting people know there was a thing, getting some feedback, getting some engagement. I'm working on a game, Hold Fast Station now, and that's what we're doing. There's a light version of the game floating around the internet. You can get it on the Discord off of my site, and like it's a whole thing. We've had thousands of people download the game now, and in March the game will be on sale with art and with like a whole game. And so kind of we're doing that freemium model thing, and this is the part you do before you publish. So like we're building an audience, we're getting it ready, and to that point, um the way we're doing that, we cheated. Like this is all a stretch goal for the Stone Top Kickstarter. So like I was able to get on board of that, and so now their audience for Stone Top is also like, oh look, another game. And so and all of these people are hearing my name. All of these people are like doing their own mental calculation to figure out like, oh, do I care about like anime style Forged in the Dark games? Yes or no? Let me go look at this other game. So I've sold uh, dozens of PDFs, through that process. But it's more advertising, oh, Poplar game designer, than advertising the game, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. That makes sense when you're in that kind of situation. Doing it like this is who I am kind of marketing is, I think, is really good. But Alastor, something came up that with Mo, but also something you brought up earlier too about marketing. What about kickstarting as a marketing vehicle? Because we know it's a funding vehicle, but what I find more and more and more, people are using it much more as a marketing vehicle than a like. I mean, it's almost like the financial side is a great side benefit, but it's almost becoming for some companies that side benefit where it's like, yes, it's raised us money, but it's also put out the marketing of the game.
Still have a lot of companies with Kickstarter for allowing the tabletop space to become like a pre-order store. Or like, let's be honest, like most of the companies that use Kickstarter use it most for the marketing purposes, and because many people actively seek on Kickstarter new projects than for the funding purposes. Like a lot of the goals are actually underfunded or under the actual goals. That's why you have stretch goals. So yeah, I have found that using Kickstarter as a marketing is like very effective because people actively seek new Kickstarters, like the news report on them, like things like Endwar and stuff like that. Also have like new or more interesting Kickstarters this month or this week. So yeah, using Kickstarter as a marketing tool like works very well. It can get you like new clients from all over the world. Has like its own issues, like because running a Kickstarter is no easy thing. But yeah, mostly if you use it as a marketing tool, it's actually very easy and a very good idea. The main thing, the issue with Kickstarter and using it as a marketing is that it's very bad to track the Facebook ads for it.
Okay, yeah. Again, I've never used Facebook ads. So what is like, if you're trying to do that, what does that look like for you in regards to like using them or like with a Kickstarter? Like, because how is it bad? I don't know anything about it.
Mainly because Kickstarter, the Facebook pixel that Kickstarter offers is useless. We have never managed to get it to work. And apparently that's like a very common thing, not even backers and many of that people know how to make it work. So you want to track it, what most people or most of the companies do, they have like a middle page. That's like when you click on a Kickstarter ad, it says project domino, blah blah blah, redirecting, and then it redirects you to the Kickstarter page, because that's how you can track how successful your ads are. In our case, we track it because we created like specific links with the Kickstarter, and we put that in the Facebook ads, and it more or less managed to allow us to track how well we were doing.
Okay, see, didn't know. That's good to know, and it's a good piece of information to have, right? If you're planning on the Kickstarter with Facebook ads. So my other question then is, let's talk about APs. Let's talk about reviewers. Let's talk about.
Can you scroll back one question real quick? So Alastor, I feel like there's a elephant in the room. My dumb question is, are you publishing books in English, Spanish, or both?
That's a very sad question for us. Originally, we wanted to publish them in English and in Spanish. Issue is that nobody ordered it in Spanish, and it's extremely expensive for us to do the translation, well, to write in both languages and do the layout, because layout for both language is two very different beasts.
Yep.
So mainly we're publishing, all the big books are going to be published only in English. We have found some of a bigger community using TikTok in Latin America, more of people interested. So we may try to release some of the smaller games like the Sign Quest, Escasentai, and stuff like that also in Spanish. But it's not going to be like a lot of the games because, as I mentioned, we didn't have like that many people ordering in Spanish in our first try. And yeah, that's more of a cultural thing because most of the Spanish market is in Spain. Right. So there's like a lot of RPG publishers in Spanish, but they are Spain based because there's like a huge market there and people actually buy it. One thing to remember is that at the end of the day, RPG products are luxury products.
Right.
And the median income in Latin America is not that high. So it makes more sense for people in Spain that have like a first world income to buy RPG books like more common than what I do in Latin America.
Got it.
Well, like for smaller projects, like for smaller works, I have actually seen like a lot of support from the Spanish buyers. So
Mhm.
it mostly depends on how big the product is and how expensive it's going to be to make it in both languages.
Right.
And
Well,
so what I'm
and just
hearing
throwing
is,
another question, Mo, can I throw it in there too? Because I'm also guessing this, like, because as a French speaker in Canada, I know how I would write in French in Canada is very different from how they write in French in France. So I can't just do a French translation and have it not run into problems, even language problems, if I were to try to then sell that in France.
Because that's something that a lot of people locally complain about the D&D translations because they're meant in Spain.
Mhm.
And Spanish Spain from Spanish is not like the most common Spanish, to be honest. Like,
Right.
so
No,
it has like a lot of local words and specific words that make a lot of sense if you live in Spain. If you live in any other part of a Spanish-speaking country, it doesn't make any sense, or it's more like, yeah, I get this word, but it sounds very archaic.
so sorry,
Um,
Mo, go ahead.
so what I'm hearing is that there is both not a large market, but also a margin issue, because maybe people in Latin America might have kind of a less luxury spin opportunity than um, people in Spain. Is that what I'm hearing, Alistair?
Mm.
Yeah. Basically, like the median salary here, even if they have like a very semi-decent job, is around 600 USD per month.
Hmm. Hmm.
So when that's like a high income for people around here, like buying a $60 or a $40 RPG is not something
Like,
that they can do like constantly or
I'm
very
gonna
easy.
spend 10% of my monthly income on this book, right?
Right,
Like,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, is there
Yeah,
a
that's why they
appetite?
prefer like smaller books like Sign Quest and stuff like that. Like yeah, anything between the 20 to $30 range, people are actually seeking to buy it. And that's like the range of the books we are going to try to publish in Spanish to
Hmm.
promote and sell.
Right, thank you.
Yeah. So then to move forward to the next one, if we're all good to move forward to that, because I was going to say, yeah, I understand completely the layout issue because the number of words you use to describe things is different, right? As
Mhm.
as somebody who speaks
Yes.
French, right? Yes, like what English will take 3 words to describe, French will take 10, right? And so that just immediately changes your layout look because all of a sudden now it's on a different page. You're like, oh, this is terrible. Yeah, no, I totally get that with the issue there. But let's talk about APs. Let's talk about podcasters, other advertising avenues. Like how are you looking at that? What does that look like for you? Have you tried? Have you seen anything? Mo, I'm gonna start with you, and then
I have been on maybe 7 podcasts
Mhm.
with Shibuya Nights, and it's a nice little hustle because apparently there's 2 more podcasts every day. And as people develop audiences, you have this content that you know typically folks go back and they dive into the archives, and they stumble across you, and it's a good look. There definitely there's definitely a point, with only a handful of games under my belt. Some people don't necessarily see me as a legitimate designer, and so I have waited behind bigger designers to get on certain podcasts. Um, but it's an effective way of getting outreach, and you can capture this information and put it on your site. So when people come to look at your game, they can then re-download the podcast, and find out information about the game. I strongly recommend you get the file of the podcast, because 2 of the podcasts I've been on have pod faded, you know, and what you don't want is to go out and do all this ground game only to have the media disappear, because legitimately somebody else doesn't want to pay to keep it up.
Mhm. No, that's fair. That's a good. Honestly, that's a thing I didn't even think about. So I think it's a really good point. Alastor, what about you?
See, Soka trying to reach out to reviewers and stuff like that. We did a little for wildlife, but it mostly we are working on that. It's still a work in progress for us. We're mainly trying to use Twitter, and we have sent the copies where they never answer, and we try to reach again and stuff like that. So yeah, I am very bad on that at that section of the making games area.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, like for me, I've always been talking about not just, here's a product, but here is me. Here is me talking about the product, right? I know that there's a couple of places, I mean, again, like anything else.
I need to go out quickly. I'll be right back.
No problem. Thanks, Alistair. Hold on. So I'm sure it's all switched up, and Andy's now what's going on, and we may be in different spots. That's fine. I'm still Jonathan. That's still Mo. I hope I pointed in the right direction. That's where Mo is on my screen. But yeah, I know that for me that there are a lot of really good places. I can't help. I know he's super busy and has up to his eyeballs and has closed his submission thing. But I can't recommend Jeff Stormer's Party of One as an actual play podcast. It's fantastic. He's fantastic. He's a wonderful, lovely host and is very excited about games. So I know that he's been fantastic for a lot of people. I know that I've reached out to a couple different podcasts, and again, I've been at this 20 years, and I'm still not a name for either that or something pops up. So I think the key thing there is to keep trying, and keep reaching out to people to see what's going on there, because like you said, there's a new podcast every day. Or what's the other joke? What's the collective noun for a group of dudes? A podcast. Right. But yeah, so and I know, which is Alistair brought it up too, is that I know board game TikTok is becoming a big thing. So like that's an avenue I haven't even looked into, mainly because the app was like, I want all access to everything, and it's like, why? But okay. But I know that that's a big thing, and I know that that's a big area. And being internet old, I'm like, another one, right?
Right. No, I definitely have this feeling, and my wife and a lot of my younger friends, they're constantly insistent, like you can't just recopy content to each platform. Each platform has its own kind of window size for your graphics. Each platform has its own like feel, and it's kind of like going out there and making friends, or as my dating friends, it's like dating. And I'm just, yeah, I'm not in the mood.
Okay, well, I think we're at about 5 minutes left to the panel. So do you have, I think the last thing is, I mean, because the marketing and the distribution end up coming to the sales point. And I feel like it's all kind of, I don't really have a question about sales, because for me, that's the end point. That's already, it's in the store's hands. We're at a convention. I've already done the sale. Like someone has it, and hopefully someone is enjoying the game. Because having seen both your games, I think they're both wonderful and awesome games. Anything else along this process do you think that we haven't touched that you may want to talk about? Any other kind of thoughts have come up? Any last kind of ideas? If not, we can ask Eric if there's any questions in the queue.
The early birds are currently quiet. No questions for you. You can continue talking as you are.
All right. Perfect. Okay.
So for me, I think it's just I released my game last November in the middle of COVID, and I have to constantly keep reminding myself, like, this is gonna be a long tail game, if that makes sense. And it's gonna do what it does when it does it, and assume that when conventions across the country open up, I'll have an opportunity to go and register and play. I don't know if we talked about that. I think SEO is still a thing when people look up your stuff, and a lot of game conventions leave their old schedules up. So if you pre-reg your game as an official game of a convention, like that comes up, and like essentially nobody wants to play a game that nobody's playing. So I mean, what you're trying to do is you're just trying to build buzz for a game that is not D&D. And these days not Blades in the Dark, which has a TV show. So
That's awesome to see. But actually, that's the one thing we didn't talk about. That let's talk about game design and publishing in the time of COVID. So that's North America dealing with that. Alastor, how's it like for you in Mexico dealing with COVID and all this kind of stuff?
Well, I still have horrible. Like the main thing that we are suffering is like, I mean, the team has always been like full work from home, but like we are really strong with the playtests because we used to do a lot of public playtests in like local stores and stuff like that, or in the faculty. Yeah, now we don't have public playtests, and it's really slowing things up for a lot of our projects because we actually need to like the blind playtest, test the rules, stuff like that. And also because we are really dependent on conventions to get like more of our freelance work. And now without conventions, that's getting like very harder. Yeah, it mainly makes things harder on the developing area, more for playtest and for getting new small freelance jobs.
Yeah, and that's kind of, Go ahead, Mo.
Before the summer, I had a huge captive audience for playtests online. I was able to set up Eventbrites, and even people who weren't part of my network were finding my playtests, signing up just to do something. But as things got warmer and as the vaccine rolled out, my playtests went from like, 3 people on the wait list to like, only one person showed up, in June. People started going outside. So I think some of us, including myself, missed a huge opportunity to like organize online games last year.
But that's a job. That's a full-time job, right? Like
it's a hustle.
large companies have an actual play coordinator. That's their whole job, right? It's hard. And the other thing too is that again, like it depends because when you talk about things opening up, I mean, in Ontario where I am, like things aren't still open up. We're slowly getting to that point, which I think is ridiculous because we're still in the middle of a pandemic, right? But like we've just let bars and gyms go to full capacity if they have a vaccine mandate. If they can say you don't have 2 vaccines, get out. That's the only time they're letting them do that. But that's like conventions are opening again, but it still feels like it's still, we're still in that kind of space. But again, that's North America. We've had the bulk of the vaccine. I mean, in North America, that's Canada and the US. We're 2 countries that have to all the vaccines, right?
Right.
So, I mean, that looks like the press. Alastor, what does that look like for you?
So, in our case, I got a little lost. Sorry. What was the question?
No, just so how is that like physical space opening up, or is it opening up where you are?
Yeah, technically we have been open for around 2 or 3 months, but that's because the government doesn't really care about us.
We're opening. They're paying no attention to what's actually happening. God, everyone just continue on as you were.
Yeah, that's basically I'm wondering the last few months. Anyway, so basically with some of the stores they have like very strict like mask things, taking your temperature and stuff like that. But yeah, it's mostly you have to take care of yourself around here. It's not like that being enforced that hard for a lot of people. Yeah, that has been complicated, and we try to like keep it like as safe as possible. Yeah, we also had issues like we had like most of the online tools that we could use to play some of the games. All of them are in English. That complicates a little for the local playtests. And in the case of the US, they want to have like all the rules and all the TDVs for Roll20, PT, tabletop, stuff like that in English, and we don't have all that resources yet.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I guess anyway, so I think we're at time. So with that, Alastor, do you want to give us where we can find your stuff? And then Mo, we're going to do that, and I'll close this up.
Yeah, you can actually find us by Access Stories. I put the link in the panel hangout. Just AXO space stories. We are like that on drive-thru. We have most of our games coming out next year. Tales from the Gods, which is a solo journaling RPG. It's less than 1,000-year-old vampire. And Legendary Facts, which is a supplement for 5e of epic level 5, similar to Show of the Colossus, more like a video game feel to it.
One of my favorite games, so I'm looking forward to that one. Mo, how about you?
You can find me at ashyfeet.com. I'm ashyfeet1 on Twitter, and you on ashyfeet.com you'll find the Discord for Holdfast Station, which is the game we have coming out, and it's gonna be, it's a game. We also have Zero Samurai, where you've heard the movie Seven Samurai. This is the village. You play the village if the samurai don't show up against the bandits. Spaceport Cantina, and a couple other games that we're developing on that. And Shibuya Nights is still available.
Awesome. And thank you. I'm Jonathan Lavallee. You can find me at Firestorm Inc. and pretty much everything on Twitter, on Drive-Thru, on Itch, and firestorm-ink.com. That pun has gotten me into more trouble than I'd care to think. But again, thank you so much for attending this panel. Hopefully you've learned something. Hopefully you've got some information out of it, and we'll enjoy the rest of Metatopia.
Hey, thanks.
Thank you.